In this video, I'm going to briefly take you through all of the necessary parts that you'll need for a chain link fence installation. Now, if it's your first time installing a chain link fence, breaking out the job into a clear material list can seem like a really daunting task. I have a lot of customers who are afraid that they're going to forget one of the many little pieces that you need for this kind of fence. So don't worry, this video is here to serve as a guide for you guys. And also, if you do want my help, you can text or call me at the number here. That's my cell. You could just send me a picture of the diagram of your job and I'll actually work on the material list with you so that you can place an order. We do deliver material nationwide. If you do want to place your order with us, we'd be happy to help you and be a part of your chain link fence installation. So now let's get started with the chain link fence parts. First, we're going to start with the big items. These are the things that you're least likely to forget, but are important to talk about. So we're going to start with the chain link fence wire. The wire that you order is going to depend on a few things. Number one, the height of the fence you're looking to install, and also whether it's a residential or commercial property. Now, typically for a residential property, we'll use 4-foot high, 5-foot high, or 6-foot high chain link wire. Now, if you're doing a commercial property, you might want to go up to 8 foot, and let's say you're installing a fence around a sports field or something, you wouldn't want to even go 10, 12, but chances are if you're installing a chain link fence around a sports field, you're probably not watching this video. So we're going to focus mainly on residential properties for this video. Now, typically, our most common wire that we sell and that we use for our installations is a 2-inch by 9-gauge wire. That just means that the diamonds, the squares in the wire are 2 inches and the gauge is a 9-gauge. It just refers to the thickness. Sometimes for a commercial property, we'll use a 6-gauge, but like I said, if you're installing a wire that heavy, you're probably not watching this video. So typically you would get a 2-inch by 9-gauge. If you do want to install a fence, let's say around a pool, you would want to get a mini mesh, which have 1-inch diamonds. That just makes it so it's not easily climbable. But like I said, mostly we do a 2-inch by 9-gauge wire, and when you're placing your order or writing your material list, you would simply specify the height of the wire that you're looking to install. Next, we're going to talk about our terminal posts. Your terminal post is going to mark each end and each corner of the fence you're installing. Typically, you like to use a larger terminal post than you would use a line post, which we'll get to later. The exact size of your terminal post will depend on the height of the fence you're installing and also the desired specs. Next, we're going to talk about your line posts. These are going to be all the posts in between your terminal posts. So typically, I would use a slightly skinnier line post than I use terminal posts. So for example, if I'm using a 2.5-inch terminal, I would most likely use a 2-inch line post. Now we're going to talk about top rail. For top rail, we sell 1 5/8 inch rail and 1 3/8 inch rail. If you're doing a 5 or 6 foot high fence, I would recommend doing a 1 5/8 rail. And if you're doing 4 foot high, you could do a 1 3/8 inch rail. Now we're going to talk about bottom rail. Bottom rail is optional. You do not need to put it on the fence. However, let's say you have a dog, it provides a substantial amount of strength to the fence as the dog won't be able to push on the wire and bend it. Also makes it less likely that they can dig under it.
Bottom rail looks really nice, and like I said, it provides a substantial amount of strength to the fence.
Now, if you're doing a 6 foot or 5 foot high fence, you can do actually a 1 5/8 inch top rail and then a 1 3/8 inch bottom rail if you would like, or you can keep those the same. On a 4 foot high fence, I would typically do a 1 3/8 top and a 1 3/8 bottom. Then we're going to talk about gates. Wherever you have an entranceway into the property, you're going to want a matching gate. Usually we put some decorative scroll work on the top. It just looks really nice. Next, you have tension bars.
Tension bars go on all ends of the fence next to the terminal posts, and they hold the wire in place once it's stretched.
And then the last thing on this list are the privacy slats. Now, privacy slats are optional, but if you would like to make the chain link fence more private, they're a great way. You simply just insert the slats into the chain link wire and you have a nice privacy fence. Now we'll move on to our chain link fittings. These are going to be the small parts and also the things that you're most likely to forget on the list. So we're going to go through these real quick so that way you just have a good overview of what you're going to need for this fence. So first you have your tension bands. Your tension bands are going to go on the terminal posts, and the amount of tension bands you need per terminal post is going to depend on the height of the fence and also the specs that you're looking to meet. Typically for a 4-foot high fence, I would use 3 tension bands, and then for 5 and 6, I would use 4 tension bands. You can even do 5 tension bands on a 6-foot high fence if you would like. Then you're going to need brace bands. Your brace bands are going to connect with your rail end cups, and that's where you will insert your top rail on the top and your bottom rail on the bottom to connect it with the terminal posts. Then you're going to have your line boulevards, your boulevards. These are going to go on your line posts, and they're going to basically connect the bottom rail throughout the fence. Then you're going to have your terminal caps. Then you're going to have loop caps for all of your line posts. The loop caps are going to be where the top rail passes through above all of the line posts. Then for your gates, you're going to have your collars and your fork latch. That's what's going to make up the latch for your gate. And then to make up the hinges for your gate, you're going to have frame clamps and post hinges. Once these two are put together, you have an operating hinge. Then to tie the wire to the top rail and the bottom rail, you're going to need fence ties. We sell them in short ties and long ties. For 1 5/8 inch rail, I would recommend using long ties, and then for 1 3/8 inch rail, I would recommend using short ties. Now you're also going to need nuts and bolts for all of these fittings. If you are installing double gates, you'll need drop rods with drop rod guides, so that way you have something to stabilize the double gates when you don't want both of the leaves open. Okay, that was a lot all at once, but don't worry. I'm going to show you how you can break this out into a list, so that way it's not as intimidating. So for this, you're going to need a pen and a paper. Now, in the center, I'm going to draw my house. All right, now we're going to start drawing the fence. So let's say here, I have 4 feet and 4 feet, and here I have a 4-foot gate. And going this way down the side, I have 80 feet. Then going across this way, I have 120 feet. And then I want to come down this way, only 60 feet. And then I want to go across the house 20 feet. This right here is our initial diagram. Now we have to break this out into an actual list. So first, we're going to look at all our terminal posts here. As you'll see, each of the circles I have on the diagram represents a terminal post. That is where the fence is starting, ending, or turning. So every end and every corner is a terminal post. So in this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm going to put that on my list over here. 8 terminal posts. Now we need to calculate the amount of line posts we're going to need. I made this real easy for myself and did round numbers, but if you want to see how we do this with uneven numbers, watch our chain link fence installation tutorial, which I'll link to at the end, so you can actually learn how to install all this once you order it. Now for these line posts, I want all the spaces between the posts to be equal, but not greater than 10 feet. I don't want any spaces between posts to be larger than 10 feet. So for an 80-foot run, we're going to have 7 line posts, because I'm going to have 8 sections of fence there, basically. And I'm just going to make dashes to represent each line post. Now for the back 120 feet, I know I'm going to need 11. And then for the side 60 feet, I'm going to need 5. And then for the 20 feet, I'm going to need 1. So now I'm simply going to count up my dashes, and that's going to be the amount of line posts that I need. Now, to get the amount of wire you're going to need, you're simply just going to add up the total footage of the job. And that gives us 288 feet. Now these rolls of chain link come in rolls of 50 feet. So if I had 288 feet, I would just get 300 feet of chain link. That way I have a little bit extra. But let's say you had 260 feet. In that case, I'd probably buy 5 50-foot rolls and then just 10 extra feet just buy the wire by the foot. But since we're so close to 300, I'm just going to put on the list 6 rolls of chain link. And then we're obviously in the front, we're going to need 1 gate. Now for the top rail, we're going to just take that total footage and divide it by 21. These rails come in 21-foot lengths, and they're swedged, so that way you can connect them into each other. So in this case, we're going to do 288 feet divided by 21, and that gives you 13.7. So we're going to get 14 top rail. Now, if you're going to do bottom rail as well, you're simply just going to double that. So if I need 14 top rail, I'm also going to need 14 bottom rail. Now, most of the time you're going to be doing the same size top and bottom rail. So you would just put, in this case, 28, whatever size of rail you're using. But if you did want to do a different size top rail than you are using bottom rail, which we do sometimes, you would just want to specify that. Now we're going to count the amount of tension bars that we're going to need. So when you're getting your tension bars, you're going to get the same height tension bar as you get height of wire. You're going to need a tension bar next to each terminal post, so right here between sections there. So you would simply count. We're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now if you want to make this fence private and order privacy slats, just know that each bag of privacy slats covers about 10 feet of fence. So in this case, since we have 288 feet, we'll call it 290 feet, you're going to need 29 bags of privacy slats. My favorite privacy slats to use are wingtip slats. This is what you most commonly see in our installation videos. I find that they're really easy to use and they offer the most privacy, but we also offer lock top slats and hedge slats depending on your preferences. So I'm going to put here 29 bags of privacy slats. And when you're placing your actual order, you would just specify with me which kinds of slats you want. Now we're going to talk about fittings. We're going to start with the fittings for our terminal posts. So let's say this is just to make it easy, we're going to do a 4-foot high chain link fence. All right. So each terminal post is going to need 3 tension bands. Now, an end post is going to have fence going in one direction, as you'll see here. So you're just going to need one set of fittings. But over here on corner posts, you're going to have fence going in 2 different directions. So you need to double up on all of your fittings. So we're simply going to count everywhere that we're going to need tension bands. That's what we're starting with here. And for a 4-foot high fence, we're going to use 3 tension bands per terminal. So let's go ahead. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now you just take 12, multiply it by 3, and that gives you 36 tension bands. Now when you're ordering the tension bands, you would also specify the size of the tension bands. The size of the tension bands that you're using will be the same as the size of the terminal post you're installing. So if you're doing a 2-inch terminal post, you would get 2-inch tension bands. If you're using a 2.5-inch terminal post, you would use 2.5-inch tension bands. Now we're going to do brace bands. You're going to need 1 brace band per terminal for the top rail and 1 for the bottom rail. So for each terminal, I'm going to need, in this case, since we're going to do top and bottom for this example, we'll need 2. So you would just do 12 times 2 and you would need 24 brace bands. Then for each brace band, you're going to need a rail end cup. And then finally, while we're finishing up the terminal posts, you're going to need 12 terminal caps. That's going to be 1 cap per terminal post. For each line post, you're going to need 1 loop cap for the top rail and 1 line boulevard for the bottom rail. So in this case, since we have 24 line posts, we're going to get 24 line boulevards and 24 loop caps. Now when you're ordering your loop caps and your line boulevards, you'll simply specify the post and the rail that you are using. So let's say, for example, you were using a 2-inch line post and a 1 3/8" rail. You would say, I need 2-inch by 1 3/8" line boulevards. Then for the loop cap, you would simply say, I need a 2-inch by 1 3/8" loop cap. 2-inch being the post, 1 3/8 being the top rail. Now we'll talk about the hardware for the gate. You're simply going to need a set of hinges and a latch, and both the hinges and the latch are going to come in 2 parts. So the hinges are going to be made up of frame clamps, which are going to go on the gate, and post hinges, which are going to go on the terminal post. In this case, we're going to need, since we only have 1 gate, you're going to need 2 frame clamps, and you're going to need 2 post hinges. Then for the latch, you're going to need 1 set of collars and 1 fork latch. You'll need to specify the size of the frame and the size of the terminal post that you are using. Wow, we needed a new page for this. Next, you're going to need ties. Now in this case, since I said we're doing a 4-foot high fence, we're going to use short ties because we're using 1 3/8" rail. And now keep in mind that 1 bag of ties will cover about 100 feet of fence. So in this case, since we have just under 300, we'll need 3 bags of ties. But consider that we're doing a top and a bottom rail. So you will need to multiply that by 2 to account for both the top where you're going to be tying and also the bottom where you're going to be tying. So in this case, we're going to need 6 bags of ties. So now we're moving on to our nuts and bolts. You're going to need one 1 1/4 inch bolt with a nut for each tension band and for each brace band. So if we look at our fittings, we have on here 36 tension bands and 24 brace bands. So we're going to need 60 1 1/4 inch nuts and bolts for the brace bands and the tension bands. Then your collars for the gate are going to require 2, so you're going to need 2 for that. So that brings you to 62. I would get a few extra just so you have them in case. So for a job like this, I would probably show up to the job with 70 or 80 just so I have some extra.
Then for your frame clamps, the size of your bolt will depend on the size of your gate frame. But for a typical 1 3/8 inch residential gate, we would use 2-inch bolts. Then for the post hinges, you will need 2 longer bolts. For a 2.5 inch terminal post, we will use 3-inch bolts.
And then for all the line boulevards, we're going to need 2. So I have 24 line boulevards, so I need 48 for those, and then 2 more for my post hinges. So I'm going to need 50 3-inch. And then for my frame clamps, I'm going to need 2 2-inch. Then lastly, if you are getting double gates, so you have a double door opening and closing like this, you'll need a drop rod for the center of that gate. Some people, they like to do 1 drop rod, others they like to use 2. That's really going to depend on your preferences, but you'll need to get 2 guides for each drop rod that you're installing. Then remember, if you are doing double gates, the size of your fork is going to be the same size as your gate frame, not the size of the terminal post. I've made this mistake. So make sure you get the right size fork. Then lastly, if you're installing a colored fence like black or green, you'll probably want to go to the job with a can of spray paint of that color, so that way if you do need to make any touch-ups, you can easily do so. Also, we typically install our chain link fences with galvanized nuts and bolts, and at the end, we just spray paint them the color to match the fence that we're installing. So for this job here, here's the material list that I drafted. Now, I know I don't have sizes on here. If I was actually making this for a job, not just example purposes, I would have the size of each of these components, but I just wanted to quickly take you through this so that way you have a general overview of how to do it. Now, as you can see with chain link fences, this is a really challenging video to make because there are so many customizations that you can make in the exact specs of your installation, and to make a one-size-fits-all video is extremely hard, and I get that you might not have gotten exactly what you wanted from this. So like I said before, if you do have more specific questions, just text me or call me or leave a comment down below. I will get back to you and we could sort through things. But I hope that for those of you just looking to get your foot in the door with a chain link fence installation, that this video was useful to you. I hope that you can measure out your property, draw up a little diagram like I did, and simply break this out into a material list so that way you can get started with placing your order. Now, if you have gotten past this step and now you're on the job site looking to actually install this fence, check out the related content here where I'll take you through our 9-step process for installing a chain link fence. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also subscribe to the channel, helps us tremendously. We'll see you in the next one.